Hey there, it's BoardGameDave, and today we're taking a look at a game that's live right now on Kickstarter and has raised already over $570,000 from over 5,000 backers. It's a game that's getting a ton of hype and praise and excitement from all over the board game community, and it's a game called Galactic Cruise. This is a game designed by TK King, Colton Thompson, and Dennis Northcott with artwork and I think graphic design by Ian O'Toole himself. So, I was lucky enough to get sent this prototype copy, which I wasn't expecting at all, and I've been super pleasantly surprised with the quality of this game. Now, this is still a prototype, which you won't believe once you get a kind of a close-up look at this game with the artwork and the components, this double-layered player board and the rulebook and everything. It looks phenomenal, and I've been having a blast teaching it to friends and showing everybody I can think of this amazing game. In fact, I've played it 4 times just this week, and I'd play it more if I had more time, but it's been a blast. So today we're going to give you a quick kind of broad overview of how the game plays, not a full rules teach, but kind of a general idea of how the game works. And then today I'm going to give you my full review treatment for Galactic Cruise. It's still a prototype, as I said, but it seems like it's 98% finished, and I think I've played it enough at different player counts, 2-player, 4-player. I played it solo as well, and I think I can just go ahead and give it my full review. So let's head to the table, talk about how the game works, and then come back to talk about what I like so much about Galactic Cruise. Let's do it. All right, people, so obviously at first glance, this is a very big, intimidating, sprawling, scary-looking game with a lot going on, and that's true. I'm not going to give you a full rules teach today. That would take about 50 to 60 minutes in my experience. Today, we're going to go for just like a 5-minute big overview of what you're doing in this game. So in Galactic Cruise, of course, we're getting resources to load up our shuttles, get some guests, entice them to come on our cruise, score points, score reputation as well. And that's what we do. On a typical turn in Galactic Cruise, you're going to take one of your workers here and place them out on one of these 6 action spaces. If I go here, I can, well, you're always going to take 2 actions. I could take the top action and the bottom action, or maybe take the top action twice. If there's somebody in the space I want to go to, I can bump them out, right? That doesn't cost me anything, but when they return back to their player board, they go back to the break room, they get what's called a funding bonus, and you can see all 4 of the funding bonuses they can choose from, $1, and add a point, or a resource. So you are disincentivized from bumping people off because you know they're going to get a little advantage, right? But here's a really unique twist of Galactic Cruise, adjacencies. So if I put my meeple here, right, I could take these actions here, but I also have access using my development I placed to this adjacent spot, right? And if on my turn I was placing here, right, I have access to this location and this location. Now, I also technically have access to this location to take those actions, but I don't have a development there, right? Other players do. So if I wanted to use this adjacency, I would have to pay each player with a cog there, that's not me, $2. And that's represented here on the reputation track. As I increase reputation, that cost gets cheaper to pay other people to use their developments. And I'll point this out now. Those developments work the same way up here. There's 4 technologies up at the top of the board, and they're basically like passive upgrades that you've unlocked, right? Hopefully. Same thing here. If I have that technology upgraded, I have access to that. But if I want to use somebody else's, or if somebody wants to use mine, they have to pay $2 at the beginning of the game. So there's big incentive to get those developments out on the board early on in the game, so you're getting that passive income from people using your developments. Anyway, let's very quickly breeze through these 6 action spaces and talk about what they do. So up at the top here, well, maybe I'll just show you, okay? This is very simple, right? Pay $1 for 2 resources, pay $1 for 2 ads. Resources are shown here. Getting those developments out also increases your maximum storage. So that's a nice bonus. You can also score endgame points by getting a lot of those developments out on the board. This action here allows you to take up to 2 blueprints from over here. Blueprints show a couple different things. They have a title, the arcade. They show you what kind of guests might like this attraction, right? In this case, family-oriented guests and relaxation-oriented guests. There's also more adventure-oriented guests, and they're over here in the queue lining up outside of the company waiting to sign up for a cruise. So that's shown there. There's the cost to construct this segment of the ship, and also the points you'll score at the end of the game. So that's how that works. You take 2 blueprints, you add them to your blueprint supply storage over there. All right, let's keep going over here. You take a cockpit and an engine. So you take a matching set like so. The top one has a scoring criteria. That's going to trigger every time you launch the rocket ship and at the end of the game. At the bottom, there's a quick little bonus, one-time thing, $2 and a funding bonus. So you want to be strategic about the ones you take, and you add them to your silo over here. At the beginning of the game, you're limited to 3 shuttles with 3 inner segments each, but that can be increased throughout the course of the game. Down here, this is where you're going to build segments onto your ships. You can either build them from your blueprint storage by paying the cost here and flipping it over, adding it to your shuttle, or you can buy them directly from the board, right? Skipping that whole blueprint step, but you do pay a cost of money and reputation depending on the slot that it's in. So that's a disincentive of doing it straight from there. All right, let's move on to here. This is where you're going to start kind of claiming these different cruises. So we have different itineraries over here. All you're going to do to claim a cruise is put your cruise coordinator onto the cruise that you want to go on. Let's say I want to go on this top one here. And at this point, you're going to flip one of your upgrade tokens. I'm not going to talk about that too much, but these down here give you an immediate one-time bonus, and the ones up here will upgrade your funding bonus. So you get double that funding bonus when you choose that. So that's that one. And the one above it simply allows you to pay ads corresponding to the cost here to take guests from the supply and add them to that cruise. And you want to match colors. You see how this itinerary is a day in space, then an orange location, day in space, and a family teal location. So matching those colors will get you more resources, more dollars, more reputation, all that good stuff. So suffice to say, you want to match those colors. All right, fantastic. Let's come down here. You go to the silo, you buy 3 resources or get 3 resources, and you have to use what's in the silo here. So throughout the course of the game, these are going to decrease until somebody goes to here, which is spending an agenda card to refill one of those supplies. And when you do that, you max it out to the top, you get $1 for each space you moved it up, and a reputation. Now, let me talk about reputation very quickly. This track down here is interesting because once per turn, you can decrease your reputation as much as you want to gain the benefits below. But here's the caveat. Only one type of benefit. So if I'm already at 8 reputation, and let's say I really need 2 resources, I'd have to drop from here all the way to here, from 8 to 5, to get those 2 resources. And I don't get the other benefits. I have to choose one type of resource. So that's increasing reputation, and it's good for points, and it's good for other bonuses throughout the course of the game. Over here, this is where you're going to hire one of your expert workers. They have various costs, but there's 2 expert workers that'll come out on your board, and each game, the ability of the expert worker can be kind of randomized. There's, I think, 6 in the base game to choose from, so they have a special bonus as well, and having more workers is great because you only have 2 at the beginning of the game. And down here, this is how you build more of those developments out on the board. They have an increasing cost. These are 5, these are 6 there, these are 7, and you can pay them with money and or resources. And then over here, this last location is either taking 2 agenda cards or refilling and gaining some bonuses. Now, these agenda cards, as we have been finding out, are extremely interesting and powerful. So most of them will show you a location or action that corresponds with the agenda. So when I do this action, I can play this card to get a benefit. You can also just discard them as the resource printed there, which is sometimes very valuable as well. So those are the agenda cards. There's a big fat stack of them, and they are all unique and very interesting and powerful. So that's the action board. All right, now, the most exciting part about this game, launching shuttles into space. So let's say you're ready to do that. We're gonna go through this countdown and I'll show you what you need to launch. So first thing you would do is take an available worker, and we're gonna go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. All right, so let's take a look down here. The first space is taking a cruise that you claimed, which is over here, okay? You're gonna add it above your rocket. Now, we'll assume that I had more segments on my ship. I would need to have at least 2 to launch my space shuttle. So let's say I had something like so. So I move my cruise over, my guy goes back to his spot, and the guests come onto my ship. Now, this cruise, even though it has 2 segments, can only hold 1 guest. I lose 2 reputation for not being able to put my other guy onto my cruise ship, which is shown here, but that's okay. Moving up to here, I move a cube up onto this track. Now, this is gonna score you points throughout the 3 scoring phases of the game. It's also the timer for the game. Once that final cube space is filled, we trigger the end game. So that's how we progress the game, by launching and also by accomplishing objectives, which are randomized at each start of the game. So that's a cube speeding up the game. Then I have to pay costs. I have to pay food equal to number of guests plus 1 for my pilot. Down here, this is oxygen per segment and fuel as printed on the board. So I pay that resource cost. Next, we're going to score my shuttle based on the criteria and flip it over. Now, we only do that once because each shuttle that doesn't ever get launched loses 5 points, which is shown here at the end of the game. So we want to flip that over to show that we have indeed launched that shuttle. Next, we move our upgrade token onto here. Like I said, removing these is going to increase your funding bonus and can make this guy cheaper, but that's neither here nor there. And finally, we take our meeple and add him to the cockpit because he's going to be flying our cruise ship into space. Now, something very interesting happens at this point. Once we have a cruise ship in space, in each of our subsequent turns, before we take our main action, we're actually going to advance our cruise ship. So remember our itinerary here, right? Once it comes back to my turn, my meeple is actually going to move to the first space in my itinerary, which is a day in space. Now, at this point, my guests are going to score me either points, money, or reputation, right? Based on the color and assuming that they match the segments that I have here. So that's how that works. And then these are destinations that we visit. Now, let me show you on my board. Actually, I'll use this one. If I go to, let's say later on in the game, I end up at that teal location, I have a teal person on my board, right? First, I would take my upgrade token, which shows an extra point, and I'd put it in one of these upgrades. They're all different and they're all very powerful and very unique and exciting. So maybe I put it here, right? Just an example. This one means every time I increase my reputation, I get those resources and bonuses underneath it. That is very, very strong. And I pay 1 ad to score 3 + 1, 4 points for my teal guest. So I pay an ad, that's what these ads are for usually, and I score 4 points. If I had guests of a different color, right, I'd have to pay double, 2 ads, right? So in a macro sense, that is a very, very quick overview of what you're doing in the game. You're gaining resources, you're building new shuttles, you're adding segments, you're claiming cruise itineraries and attracting guests, you're sending them out into space, you're scoring points, getting more developments, getting expert workers, getting agenda cards to help bolster your returns. You're going to be completing objectives, like I said here. This is number of developments, sets of tags on your shuttles, and having upgrades on different planets. But again, this is just a starting recommended setup. And speaking of, I should mention, oh boy, that didn't work. I should mention that this is largely based on the starting recommended setup. A lot of these locations have synergies either within the action space or with adjacent spaces and technologies and expert workers and the starting recommended setup here. So a lot of this is first game recommended setup. Now, in the final game, this is just a prototype, the one side of the board is going to have this all pre-printed so you don't have to worry about these modular board pieces, right? So first game, you can just jump right in. On the back side, it will look a little bit more like this with everything modular that you can shuffle up. These can be fully interchanged and mixed and relocated and different technologies, different expert workers. You can choose to not use these starting recommended cruises. So there's a lot of variability, modularity in this game. But again, I've been sort of using the recommended first, second game setup for my games. But hopefully that was not too overwhelming and sort of a nice basic overview of how we play Galactic Cruise. All right, so hopefully that gave you kind of a rough overview of how the game plays, at least somewhat, and now we can talk about my review of Galactic Cruise. So first, let's talk about the art and components. And obviously, as you can tell, the artwork on the box, the artwork on the board, the iconography, the components, everything looks super, super nice. And remember, this is still just a prototype copy, but I love these double layer boards. I love how clear the iconography is. I like these giant gear tokens and these almost comically large meeples that you're moving around the board. I like the action tiles right here that you've got and the cruise itineraries and the rocket ship pieces. Everything looks so good. I will say, as you may know, I'm not a huge fan of cardboard money tokens, and also these ads are also these punch board, cardboard, punch outs. So that part, not my favorite, but if you do want upgraded acrylic versions of those components, that is an option on the Kickstarter as well. So based on what I'm seeing right now, and again, with the asterisk that this is still prototype components, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. I think it's lovely. I think it's readable. I think everything is super easy to understand and intuitive. So Art and components, 9.5 out of 10. Next is complexity versus audience. And I think that the design team absolutely knocked it out of the park here. From the box cover to the player board to the main board out here to the artist. Everything about this screams mid to heavyweight Euro, strategy, resource management. And I think that it also has this Vital Lacerda look. It looks like maybe like a Kanban EV. And I think that's definitely, on purpose. This is supposed to scream heavy midweight Euro. So it's certainly reaching the targeted audience. And I think that the weight of the game and the mechanisms of the game totally cater to the type of gamers who are going to be very, very excited looking at a game like this. So honestly, this is a 10 out of 10. It knows the audience it wants, and everything is perfectly tailored and honed into that gaming audience. So they did a great job with that. 10 out of 10 for complexity versus audience. Next is thematic integration, and I think that the guys did such an incredible job of making this whole game experience feel extremely thematic. So first of all, the whole main mechanism of worker placement makes a lot of sense, right? You are on the admin kind of corporate side of things, and you're kind of, telling workers where to go and what to focus on in the production side of things. And even inside the rulebook, one of the first pages you'll see is this big double-sided sheet. And it kind of goes through the whole geography of the factory. So you've got the planning and strategy, you've got the headquarters here, manufacturing side here, and then the marketing side where you're going to spend ads for guests. I love that. And there's so much theme dripping out of this rulebook as you kind of work through. And, if there's fiddly rules or just kind of a thing you have to remember, there's a thematic reason why that's in the rules. I think that's so great. Even those agenda cards, each one has a title and even has a little flavor text. So it's explaining, why did I find 3 extra blueprints, or why is this extra cheap this round? Or, they went so far out of their way to make it thematically make sense. And, even at a glance, you can sort of see, okay, I get some blueprints, then I turn those into ships, and then I get guests to go on the ships, and then I launch them into space, and they go and travel to these different locations. It's very thematic. And again, they didn't have to go as far as they did with the theme, but they did, and I think it's fantastic. So 10 out of 10 for thematic integration. You feel like you are on the board of this company, making executive decisions and kind of encouraging workers to do these specific things and launching ships into space, and it's very thematic. So 10 out of 10. Absolutely nailed it with the theme here. Next is intuitive mechanics, and this is another area where this game absolutely shines. And I think, again, going back to that thematic integration, that really helps people understand what we're doing. We need to get blueprints for segments. We're going to convert those into constructed sections on our shuttles. That's going to determine the number of guests we can take, and we want to get corresponding guests to go to the planets. Like, every piece of this game sort of makes sense intuitively, and even if you walked away from the game for a month or 2 or 3, and came back to it, I think with the iconography and with how well the theme blends into the mechanics, I think you'd be able to just kind of pick it right back up in no time. Now, there are just a small few amount of fiddly rules, as with probably any Euro game. Like when you feed, it's guests +1 for the pilot. But again, there's a thematic twist that kind of helps you remember that. Or, the way we refill the guest queue. That is kind of fiddly and strange and hard to come up with a thematic tie-in. But overall, it's very intuitive, and I think that even though the initial rules teach is extremely heavy and overwhelming, once you get going, and I've heard this from the people I've taught the game to, it just kind of all makes sense. There's kind of a narrative through line that helps it be much more intuitive. So, for intuitive mechanics, it's not perfect, but it's really good. Another 9.5 out of 10. Next is replayability, and there are a lot of ways that the design team helped to make this game much more replayable. First of all, you can rearrange those action spaces on the main board, and that's going to change your game a lot with where you're going to place your developments, how you're going to get those synergies with those adjacencies. Also, the technologies that you can unlock are going to be swapped out every game. The objectives that you're going for can be replaced every game as well. There's also the guest bonuses. Those can be changed out. Your expert workers. There's a bunch of different abilities that you can use. So each game is going to feel very different with all those different things being swapped out from game to game. So they already baked in a lot of replayability. Not to mention there's 2 expansions already out or coming with the Kickstarter. So depending on how much you want to invest in those expansions, but even with just the base game alone, there's a lot to explore here. And even with the different strategies you can try, I felt like with the different people I played with, we were trying so many different strategies. Small, fast ships that could just, take cruises over and over, or big, hunky ships that were expensive to launch but gave you lots of points, or getting all of your development cogs out early. So there's a lot to explore, and I think it's a very replayable game. I give it a 9.5 out of 10 for replayability. Next is length and fun factor. Now, make no mistake, this is not a short game, as you can probably imagine from this heavy to midweight Euro game. The box says 90 to 150 minutes, which, as always, is underselling it a little bit. Now, maybe solo, you could pull it off in about an hour and a half. That seems about fair, but once you get to 3 to 4 players, it's gonna be a fairly long experience. Now, granted, I was usually teaching the game to new players, and I played 2 4-player games. The first one was pushing almost 4 hours, and the second one was a little shy of 3 hours. Now, again, this is not including the teach, but keep in mind I was teaching newer players how to play. Could we shave an hour off that after repeated plays? I think maybe we could, but there's only so much you can plan ahead on your turn because the board state's changing all the time. So there's a lot of, analysis and maybe not paralysis, but there's a lot to think about. So games are going to be pretty long. And I will say that to counter the side of course, these were newer players I was teaching. On the other hand, I was using the shorter game variant. So in the rules teach, I explained how you're filling up those cubes to go up those tracks. That triggers the end of the game. Well, in the shorter game variant, you put some neutral cubes to kind of speed the game along. So I was using that for every game I've played so far. And even with that, we're pushing 3 to 4 hours for those bigger player count games. So for me personally, at this stage of my life, once we cross that 3-hour threshold, that's a little bit too long for me. So from a personal standpoint, I think the game's a little bit long. Oh, before I say what my rating is, I will say the fun factor is absolutely there. There's this great progression in this game where it's going to start kind of slow, and that's usually commented on when I play with people. There's a whole 50 minutes, an hour where nobody's launched anything. We're not really making progress on that track. We're not getting cubes out, but once people start launching shuttles, then they're getting income, then they're getting resources, then they're getting points and reputation, and all of a sudden that game just starts to ramp up. It's almost like an actual shuttle launch, right? Really slow at the start, but just the game starts speeding up to, space level proportions. So, and by the way, in the rulebook, I think also somewhere it says, once you hit that first scoring phase, you're about halfway done with the game, which sounds counterintuitive because there's 2 more phases left to go, but it just ramps up so fast. And every time we hit that third scoring, or the second scoring phase, the time between the second to the third scoring phase, the end game, I should say, is really, really quick. So it flies once you get started. So I will say the fun factor is there, and I love the progression of the game. It's got a nice kind of narrative arc and tension as you're trying to see who's going to trigger the end of the game. Can I get that last shuttle out without getting that 5-point penalty? So fun factor, absolutely there. My personal taste, a little bit too long. So I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10 for length and fun factor. And finally, cost versus value. Now, the base game alone is on Kickstarter right now for $89. Now, that's a steep price tag, but you are saving $20 off the MSRP. So of course, there's that draw to getting it on Kickstarter now and saving some money later on down the road. Now, that also doesn't include shipping, so you have to kind of factor that in depending on where you live. If you're trying to add an expansion, they're $15 each, or you can add both of them, bundle them together as well. And if you want both expansions and the deluxe bits, that's going to take you up to $129. But again, you're saving more off MSRP. So is it worth it? Now, of course, that's a totally personal decision. $89 is a lot of money, again, plus shipping. So it depends if this seems like a game that's up your alley. Now, if you do, I will say that there's a lot in the box, component-wise and gameplay-wise. There is such a tight and smooth and intuitive game inside this box. Is it worth $89? That's up to you. There are many other games that I'd like to play. It fits in the same weight category as Teotihuacan, which I love, which is much cheaper in price. So, you're getting a very finessed deluxe experience with this game, but is it worth $89? It's up to you. For me personally, I think it's a little bit expensive. That's just my honest take on the price tag. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 for cost versus value. Definitely a high value game, but also a very high price tag. So 8 out of 10 for cost versus value. And there you have it. Average out all of those values and you get a final score of 9.29 out of 10, which is absolutely a phenomenal score. And guys, I have been so enjoying my time with Galactic Cruise. I've been having such a nice time with it. And honestly, again, having it set up now, I really want to play it solo. I think I might try to squeeze in a solo play today before I put this all away, but it's been so much fun. It's still in development. It's still going to get better and better, but I'm just in love with this game. I think it's fantastic. This is a first-time design crew, by the way, I should say. I believe this is their first game for all 3 designers, and it is just phenomenal. It's amazing how good of a game they were able to pull off with their first major release. So good on you guys. This is amazing. You did a great job. Ian O'Toole, as always, knocks it out of the park. It's fantastic. Now, I will say I need to return this to the publishers because you can actually get one of these prototype copies depending on your base level or pledge level on Kickstarter. So if you want a prototype copy, you can get one of these as well. What sucks is that I don't get to keep this prototype copy and I have to send it back very soon. And then I won't get to play this game again until hopefully January of next year when it fulfills, which is such a long time. It's honestly devastating because I'm so enjoying my time with this, and then I won't get to play it for 10 months or so. So unfortunately, that's the harsh reality of this prototype copy, but I love it. I'm not going to mourn for the loss of the game. I'm going to enjoy and find satisfaction in the fact that I got to play the game in the first place. So it's great, Galactic Cruise. Now, quick caveat, right? This is a Kickstarter, and guys, I honestly do not do a lot of Kickstarter content. It might feel like it because I just did Flow, but before that, I think Endless Winter was the only other Kickstarter. I'm not a big Kickstarter guy. Truth be told, I've only ever backed 3 Kickstarter games in my whole entire life. Endless Winter, Verdant, and now this, which I backed at the $1 pledge level. But anyway, all this to say, guys, I am not a Kickstarter hype person. I really, truly am not. That's not why I'm here. I'm not trying to get you to spend money on stuff. I have a pretty small collection. I don't buy games very often, but I do think that depending on what kind of gamer you are, this might be one that's definitely worth checking out. Is it for every gamer? No, right? A lot of people do not want to sit through a 45-minute rule teach, but if you like heavier Euros, if you like a beautiful, crunchy, heavy Euro game, you're gonna love Galactic Cruise. So check it out right now on Kickstarter. There's a link down in the description. My battery's about to die, so I gotta get going. But in the meantime, have a wonderful week. Take care and happy gaming. Bye. Okay, I gotta turn this off because I'm worried I'm gonna lose the video if it shuts off on its own.